Maya Collins stepped through the massive doors of Nexus Prime Academy and felt every eye in the entrance hall turn toward her. The young human woman kept her face calm, even though her heart was beating fast. She had trained for this moment for 2 years, but nothing could have prepared her for the reality of being the first human to ever walk these halls. The academy stretched out before her like a crystal cathedral floating in space. Transparent walls showed the endless stars beyond, while alien students moved through corridors that seemed to bend and flow like water. Maya had seen pictures, but being here was different. Everything was too big and too bright and too strange. A tall reptilian student with green scales and yellow eyes whispered something to her friend as Maya passed. The human girl caught the word primitive in the universal translator that buzzed in her ear. She pretended not to hear and kept walking toward the registration desk. The clerk was a being that looked like it was made of living crystal. Light moved through its body in patterns that Maya guessed might be emotions. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "You are the human," it said without looking up from its datapad. "Maya Collins from the third planet of the Sol system." "Yes," Maya replied simply. "Room 847 in the new student wing. Your classes begin tomorrow. Try not to break anything important." Maya took the small device that served as her room key and student identification. As she turned to leave, she heard the crystal being mutter something about insurance policies and damaged deposits. The walk to her room took her through the main student common area. Here the diversity of the academy was on full display. Beings that looked like walking trees chatted with creatures that seemed to be made of pure energy. Flying students swooped overhead, while others crawled along the walls with dozens of legs. At a large table near the center of the room sat the most beautiful being Maya had ever seen. She was clearly an elf, with long silver hair that seemed to catch light that was not there. Her ears were pointed, and her eyes were the deep purple of a winter sky. She wore the gold insignia of an instructor and was surrounded by a group of admiring students. "That is Instructor Lirelei, Moon Whisper," said a voice beside Maya. She turned to see a young woman with blue skin and 4 arms. "She has been teaching combat theory here for over 300 years. They say she once destroyed an entire pirate fleet using only 6 ships and perfect strategy." Maya nodded her thanks for the information. The blue-skinned girl continued talking as if she had been waiting for someone to listen. "I am Kara from the Andorian sector. You must be the human everyone is talking about. I have to say you look much more normal than I expected." The stories made it sound like humans were 10 feet tall, with claws and fangs. Maya almost smiled at that. "Just regular-size humans, I am afraid. No claws or fangs either." "What a disappointment," Kara said, but she was grinning. "Well, if you need someone to show you around, I volunteer. Most of the others are either too scared of humans or too proud to talk to a new species." They walked together toward the dormitory section of the academy. Along the way, Kara pointed out important locations and explained some of the academy rules. Maya learned that students came from over 40 different worlds and species. The academy had been training the best military minds in the galaxy for over 1,000 years. "Why did they finally decide to admit humans?" Kara asked, as they rode a transport tube that moved them through the academy like a gentle river current. Maya had been asked this question during her application process and during the long journey to Nexus Prime. The official answer was that humanity had proven itself in several recent conflicts and shown potential for strategic thinking. The real answer was more complicated. "I think they want to understand us better," Maya said carefully. "Humans have been expanding into space pretty quickly, and other species are not sure what to make of us." "Are you as violent as they say?" Kara asked with the blunt curiosity that seemed common among her people. Maya considered this question seriously. "Humans can be violent when we need to be, but we can also be peaceful and creative and kind. I think most species are probably the same way. They reached the dormitory level, and Kara helped Maya find her room. The space was larger than Maya had expected, with a bed that adjusted to human proportions and a small study area. The view from her window showed the academy training grounds, where she could see students practicing with weapons and vehicles that looked like they belonged in a science fiction movie. Classes start early tomorrow, Kara said as she prepared to leave. First period is combat theory with instructor Moonwhisper. She likes to start new terms with demonstrations of primitive warfare techniques. Should be interesting with a human in the class. After Kara left, Maya sat on her bed and looked out at the stars. Earth was somewhere out there, but too far away to see, even if she knew which direction to look. She thought about her family and friends back home, and wondered if she would ever see them again. The academy was not just a school. Students who graduated became officers in the Galactic Defense Force. They would command ships and lead troops from dozens of different worlds. Maya knew that how she performed here would affect how the galaxy saw humanity for generations to come. She unpacked her few belongings and prepared for sleep. Tomorrow she would attend her first class and meet her fellow students properly. She had no idea that within a few days she would challenge everything these aliens thought they knew about human warfare. The stars outside her window seemed to pulse with possibility and danger. Maya closed her eyes and tried to rest, but her mind kept racing with thoughts of what tomorrow might bring. In the common area below, several students were still discussing the arrival of the human. Some were curious, while others were skeptical. A few were openly hostile to the idea of including such a primitive species in their advanced military academy. Instructor Lirale Moonwhisper listened to these conversations with interest. She had been teaching here since before most of these student species had developed space travel. She had seen many promising young minds come and go, but she had never taught a human before. Tomorrow she would begin her evaluation of this Maya Collins. She would test the human mind against the accumulated wisdom of 1,000 years of galactic military science. It would be educational for everyone involved. The elf instructor had already prepared her lesson plan. She would show the class examples of human warfare to demonstrate the difference between primitive aggression and civilized tactical thinking. It would be a perfect way to establish the proper perspective on human capabilities. Maya Collins slept peacefully in her new room, while around her, the academy hummed with the quiet energy of 1,000 students from across the galaxy. None of them knew that tomorrow would begin a series of events that would change how they all thought about warfare and saw about humanity. The stage was set for a confrontation between old wisdom and new ideas, between the elegant theories of ancient civilizations and the adaptive chaos of human ingenuity. Maya Collins was about to show the galaxy that sometimes the most powerful weapon was not superior technology or ancient knowledge. Sometimes the most powerful weapon was the ability to surprise everyone, including yourself. The combat theory classroom was built like an amphitheater with rows of seats arranged in a circle around a central holographic display area. Maya arrived early and chose a seat in the third row where she could see everything clearly, but would not draw too much attention to herself. Other students filed in slowly, and Maya noticed how they seemed to group together by species. The reptilian Vorthans sat together on one side, while the crystalline Quarzites took seats near the back where the light was dimmer. The insectoid Chithari clustered together, making soft clicking sounds that Maya assumed was their way of talking. Kara waved at Maya as she entered with several other blue-skinned Andorians. They took seats nearby, and Maya was grateful to see at least one friendly face in the crowd. She could feel other students staring at her and whispering in languages her translator could not identify. Instructor Lirale Moonwhisper entered the classroom like a graceful storm. Her silver hair flowed behind her as she walked, and her purple eyes seemed to take in every detail of the room and its occupants. She moved to the center of the display area and raised one delicate hand for silence. "Welcome to Advanced Combat," theory, she said, in a voice that carried easily to every corner of the room. I am Instructor Moonwhisper, and I have been studying warfare for longer than most of your species have existed. Today we begin with a fundamental lesson about the evolution of military thinking. The elf instructor gestured, and the holographic display came to life around her. Three-dimensional images filled the air, showing battles from across galactic history. Maya watched ancient space battles and ground campaigns fought with weapons and tactics she had never imagined. For millions of years, the species of this galaxy have refined the art of warfare, Lirelei continued. We have moved beyond the crude brutality of our primitive ancestors toward elegant solutions that minimize waste and maximize effectiveness. Today, I want to show you an example of what happens when a species fails to make this evolutionary leap. The display changed, and Maya felt her stomach drop as she recognized what she was seeing. The hologram now showed footage from human first-person shooter video games. Players ran through digital battlefields, firing automatic weapons and throwing explosives with wild abandon. Behold, the current state of human military doctrine, Lirelei announced with obvious disdain. Notice the complete lack of strategic thinking, the wasteful use of ammunition, the total disregard for tactical positioning or coordinated movement around. The classroom students began to laugh and make comments. Maya heard someone call human tactics suicidal, while another student wondered how humans had survived long enough to reach space with such poor military skills. A tall Vorthan with bright green scales raised her hand. Instructor Moonwhisper, why do humans insist on close-range combat when long-range weapons are clearly superior? An excellent question, Zara Lirelei replied. As you can see from this footage, humans seem unable to conceive of warfare beyond simple aggression. They rush toward their enemies like wild animals with no consideration for efficiency or preservation of resources. Maya watched the game footage continue and had to bite her lip to keep from laughing. The instructor was showing clips from various human video games and treating them as if they were actual military training videos. The complete misunderstanding was almost too ridiculous to believe. An insectoid student named Clay made a series of rapid clicks that the translator rendered as my species coordinates thousands of individuals in perfect harmony. How can humans hope to compete when they cannot even work together in small groups? Another perceptive observation, Lirelei said. The Chithari represent the pinnacle of coordinated warfare, while humans represent the opposite extreme. Individual aggression without group cohesion is a recipe for disaster on any modern battlefield. A crystalline quartzite near the back of the room pulsed with soft blue light as it spoke. I have calculated the movement patterns shown in this footage. Human soldiers waste approximately 67% of their energy on inefficient positioning and unnecessary actions. Maya had to admire the confidence with which Nix delivered completely wrong conclusions based on video game footage. She found herself wondering if she should speak up and correct the instructor, or just let this absurd lesson continue. The decision was made for her. When Lirelei focused her attention directly on Maya, the elf instructor smiled in a way that was probably meant to be kind, but came across as condescending. Miss Collins, as our resident human, perhaps you can explain why your species has chosen to maintain such primitive military doctrines, when clearly superior methods exist every eye in. The classroom turned toward Maya. She could feel the weight of their expectations and assumptions pressing down on her. Some students looked curious, while others seemed ready to laugh at whatever she might say. Maya stood up slowly and looked around the room before focusing on the instructor. With respect, Instructor Moonwhisper, I think there might be some confusion about what you are showing us. Confusion? Lirelei raised one elegant eyebrow. This footage was obtained directly from human military networks. Are you suggesting it is inaccurate? I am suggesting that what you are showing us is not military footage at all, Maya replied calmly. These are clips from human entertainment programs. Video games that humans play for fun, not for training. The classroom erupted in murmurs and whispers. Several students laughed, as if Maya had just told a joke. Lirelei looked genuinely surprised, for the first time since Maya had seen her. Entertainment, the elf instructor repeated. You are claiming that humans engage in simulated warfare for recreational purposes. Yes, Maya said simply. Humans enjoy testing themselves against challenges including simulated combat scenarios. But these games are no more representative of actual human military tactics than your holographic displays would be representative of real space battles. A Vorthan student named Zek spoke up from across the room. If this is just entertainment, then why does it look so violent and chaotic? Surely your games would reflect your actual values and methods. Maya considered how to explain human gaming culture to beings who clearly had no equivalent in their own societies. Humans often enjoy entertainment that lets them experience things they would never do in real life. We have games about racing vehicles at dangerous speeds, and games about solving crimes, and games about building civilizations. Combat games are popular because they let humans test their reflexes and decision-making in safe environments. This is absurd, declared another student. No civilized species would create entertainment based on violence and warfare. Maya felt a spark of irritation at the casual dismissal of human culture. And yet humans have created some of the most beautiful art and music and literature in known space. We are complex beings just like every other species in this room. Lirelei held upper hand for silence, and the classroom gradually quieted down. The elf instructor looked thoughtful as she studied Maya with those deep purple eyes. Very well, Miss Collins. If this footage does not represent human military capabilities, then perhaps you would be willing to demonstrate what actual human warfare looks like. Maya felt her heart rate increase as she realized what the instructor was suggesting. I am just a student, like everyone else here. I have not commanded fleets or led armies. Neither have any of your classmates, Lirelei replied smoothly. But they all understand the basic principles of how their species approaches warfare. Surely you can do the same. Maya looked around the room at the faces watching her. She could see skepticism and curiosity, and in a few cases, outright hostility. These beings had made up their minds about humanity based on completely wrong information, and now she had a chance to set the record straight. I would be happy to discuss human military philosophy, Maya said finally, but I think a simple lecture would not be as educational as a practical demonstration. Lirelei smiled, and Maya realized she had just walked into exactly the trap the instructor had been setting. An excellent suggestion, Miss Collins. Perhaps we can arrange a simulation exercise, where you can show us these mysterious human tactics that are supposedly superior to what we have seen. The classroom buzzed with excitement as students realized they might get to see the human actually put her claims to the test. Maya sat back down, feeling like she had just volunteered to prove that humans could fly by jumping off a cliff. But as she looked around at the dismissive faces of her classmates, she felt something stir inside her. These aliens thought they understood humanity based on video games and assumptions. Maybe it was time to show them what humans were really capable of when they stopped playing games and started playing for keeps. The lesson continued, but Maya barely heard the rest of it. Her mind was already working on the problem of how to demonstrate human tactical thinking to beings who had never faced a truly adaptable and unpredictable opponent. She had asked for this chance, and now she was going to get it. The question was whether she could deliver on the promise she had just made to represent all of humanity. In a test she was not sure she could pass. After the class ended, Maya remained in her seat while other students filed out in groups, talking excitedly about the upcoming simulation. She could hear fragments of conversation in different languages, but her translator picked up enough to know that most of them were looking forward to watching the human fail. Instructor, Lirelei approached her as the last of the students left the amphitheater. The elf moved with the fluid grace of someone who had lived for centuries and learned to make every motion count. Her purple eyes studied Maya with what might have been curiosity or calculation. Miss Collins, I must admit I did not expect you to to challenge my lesson so directly, Lirale said, as she sat down in the seat next to Maya. Most new students are intimidated by their first day at the academy. Maya turned to face the instructor and tried to read the expression on that ageless face. I was not trying to be challenging. I was just correcting a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding that has shaped galactic policy toward humanity for the past decade, Lirale replied. The footage I showed today has been analyzed by military experts from dozens of worlds. They all reached the same conclusions about human tactical limitations. Maya felt a chill as she realized the implications of what the instructor was telling her. You mean that military leaders across the galaxy think that video game footage represents actual human capabilities? Indeed. When humanity first made contact with galactic civilization, these recordings were among the few examples of human combat behavior available for study. Combined with historical records of your species' tendency toward aggression, the analysis seemed quite straightforward. Maya stood up and began pacing as the full scope of the problem became clear to her. No wonder. Humans had been excluded from galactic military cooperation. No wonder other species treated humanity with suspicion and disdain. They literally thought humans were violent primitives based on entertainment media. Instructor Moonwhisper, I need to show you something, Maya said, pulling out her personal data pad. May I use the classroom display system? Lirale nodded and gestured toward the control panel. Maya connected her device and began calling up files she had brought from Earth. The holographic display activated and filled with new images that made the elf instructor lean forward with interest. This is actual human military history, Maya explained as she showed battle footage from various human conflicts. Notice the careful coordination between different types of units, the strategic use of terrain and timing, the adaptation to changing battlefield conditions. The display showed human soldiers working together with precise coordination. Infantry units provided cover for engineers while artillery strikes were timed to support advancing troops. Aircraft worked in coordination with ground forces to achieve objectives with minimal casualties. Observe how human commanders adapt their tactics based on enemy responses, Maya continued. When one approach fails, they immediately try different methods. Human warfare is built around flexibility and innovation, rather than rigid adherence to predetermined strategies. Lirale watched the footage with growing amazement. These were not the chaotic rushes toward death that she had seen in the entertainment videos. These were careful, calculated operations that showed sophisticated understanding of military principles. This is remarkable, the elf instructor murmured. The level of coordination and tactical awareness is far beyond what our analysis suggested was possible for your species. Maya switched to different examples showing human, special forces operations, and naval battles. Each clip demonstrated different aspects of human military thinking, from small unit tactics to grand strategic planning. Humans excel at asymmetric warfare, Maya explained. When we face superior numbers or technology, we find ways to turn our disadvantages into advantages. We use deception and misdirection and psychological pressure to defeat enemies that should be able to overwhelm us. The display showed examples of human forces defeating larger armies through superior mobility and unpredictable tactics. Maya highlighted how human commanders would feint in one direction before attacking from an unexpected angle, or how they would use terrain features in creative ways. But this contradicts everything we thought we knew about human military doctrine, Lirale said as she studied the footage. How is it possible that such sophisticated tactics could exist alongside the primitive behaviors we observed in your entertainment? Maya smiled for the first time since arriving at the academy. Because humans understand the difference between reality and fantasy. We can enjoy violent entertainment precisely because we know it is not real. Our actual military training emphasizes discipline and restraint and careful planning. She switched the display to show human military academies and training programs. Young human officers learned complex theories of warfare and practiced decision-making in realistic simulations. The contrast with the video game footage could not have been more stark. Human military officers study the same principles taught here, at this academy, Maya continued. We learn about logistics and intelligence, gathering and combined arms operations. But we also learn something that I think other species might have forgotten, which is what Lirelei asked with genuine curiosity. We learn that no plan survives contact with the enemy. Human military doctrine is built around the assumption that everything will go wrong, and we need to be ready to improvise solutions on the spot. Maya showed examples of human commanders adapting to unexpected battlefield developments. When equipment failed, they found alternatives. When strategies collapsed, they created new ones. When faced with impossible odds, they found ways to change the rules of engagement. Other species seem to prefer elegant solutions and predictable outcomes, Maya observed. Humans prepare for chaos and uncertainty. We train our officers to think creatively under pressure, and to see opportunities where others see only problems. Lirelei was quiet for several minutes as she absorbed what Maya had shown her. The elf instructor had spent centuries studying warfare, and she recognized sophisticated tactical thinking when she saw it. The human approach was different from what she was used to, but it was clearly effective. Miss Collins, I owe you an apology, Lirelei said finally. I have made assumptions about your species based on incomplete information. This footage changes everything we thought we knew about human military capabilities. Maya felt a surge of relief that quickly turned to concern. What happens now that you know the truth? Now we must decide what to do with this information, Lirelei replied. The simulation I proposed will still take place. Your classmates will expect to see a demonstration of human tactics. But now, I am curious to see how you will perform against opponents who have been trained in traditional galactic military doctrine. Maya realized that the challenge had become even more complicated. Before, she had been worried about proving that humans were not primitive savages. Now she had to demonstrate that human tactical flexibility could compete with the accumulated military wisdom of advanced galactic civilizations. I have never commanded troops in actual battle, Maya admitted. I am not sure I can live up to the reputation you think human officers should have. Lirelei smiled, and for the first time Maya saw genuine warmth in those purple eyes. Miss Collins, I have been teaching military theory for over 300 years. I have seen students from every major species in the galaxy. What I have learned is that natural talent is more important than experience when it comes to tactical thinking. What if I fail? Maya asked. What if I prove that humans really are not ready for galactic military cooperation? Then we will learn something valuable about the limits of human capabilities, Lirelei replied. But I suspect that your classmates are in for quite a surprise. They are expecting to face a primitive human using crude tactics. Instead, they will be facing someone who represents a completely different approach to warfare. Maya felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. She was not just representing herself in this simulation. She was representing all of humanity and their future place in galactic civilization. When will the simulation take place? Maya asked. Tomorrow evening? That will give you time to study your opponents and prepare your strategy. I suggest you use that time wisely. As Maya gathered her things and prepared to leave, the instructor called out to her one more time. Miss Collins, remember that the greatest strength of human tactics appears to be adaptability. Do not try to fight like a Vorthan, or a Chithari, or a Quasite. Fight like a human, and show them something they have never seen before. Maya nodded, and left the amphitheater with her mind already racing with possibilities. She had less than 24 hours to prepare for a test that would determine how the galaxy viewed humanity for generations to come. The pressure was enormous, but Maya found herself looking forward to the challenge. For the first time since arriving at the academy, she felt like she had a chance to prove what humans were really capable of when they stopped playing games and started playing to win. Maya spent the entire night studying files on her potential opponents. The Academy database contained detailed information about the military doctrines and tactical preferences of every major species. She read about Vorthon's strategic thinking, with its emphasis on overwhelming force and direct confrontation. She learned about Chithari coordination tactics that relied on perfect communication between large numbers of individuals. She studied Quarzite analytical methods that used computational power to predict enemy movements with mathematical precision. By morning, Maya had identified the strengths and weaknesses of each species' approach to warfare. More importantly, she had begun to formulate a plan that would use human unpredictability against opponents who relied on logical and predictable tactical systems. The Academy dining hall buzzed with excitement as news of the simulation spread among the student body. Maya could feel hundreds of eyes watching her as she ate breakfast with Kara and several other Andorian students who had decided to be friendly toward the human newcomer. "Everyone is talking about your challenge with Instructor Moonwhisper," Kara said as she consumed something that looked like purple gelatin but smelled like flowers. "Most students think you are either very brave or very stupid. What do you think?" Maya asked, while trying to identify the contents of her own breakfast tray. "I think you are probably both," Kara replied with a grin. "But I also think you might surprise everyone. Humans have a reputation for being unpredictable, and that could be an advantage." Maya noticed that several students at nearby tables were not even pretending to hide their conversations about her. A group of Orthan students were discussing betting odds, while a cluster of Chithari were making rapid clicking sounds that her translator rendered as excited speculation about human tactical limitations. At a table near the center of the dining hall sat the students who would be her opponents in tonight's simulation. Maya had learned their names and backgrounds from the Academy records. Zara was a brilliant Vorthan strategist, whose family had produced military commanders for over 20 generations. Clay was a Chithari tactical coordinator who could process information from hundreds of sources simultaneously. Nyx was a Quarzite who could calculate battlefield probabilities faster than most computer systems. Each of them represented the best of their species' military traditions. Each of them was confident that their approach to warfare was superior to anything a primitive human could devise. Maya watched them discussing strategy and realized they were not taking her seriously as a threat. That was their first mistake. After breakfast, Maya made her way to the Academy Simulation Center, where she would have a chance to familiarize herself with the equipment and scenario parameters. The simulation chamber was a vast spherical room, lined with holographic projectors that could create realistic battlefield environments. Instructor Lirale was waiting for her, along with several other Academy staff members who had apparently decided to observe this unusual test. Maya recognized the Academy Commandant and the heads of several academic departments. The presence of so many high-ranking officials made it clear that this simulation had become much more than a simple class exercise. "Miss Collins," Lirale greeted. "Hurt, are you ready to see the scenario you will be facing tonight?" Maya nodded, and the chamber filled with a three-dimensional representation of a mountainous region with several strategic objectives marked in glowing symbols. The terrain was rough and complex, with multiple approaches to each target area. "The scenario is based on a historical conflict from the Vorthan homeworld," Lirale explained. "You will command a force of 100 mixed units, tasked with capturing 3 defended positions within a 6-hour time limit. Your opponents will command defending forces of equal size, with the advantage of prepared positions and interior supply lines." Maya studied the holographic battlefield and immediately began identifying potential problems and opportunities. The scenario favored traditional tactics that relied on superior numbers and coordinated assaults. Her opponents would expect her to attack directly along the most obvious routes. "What types of units will I have available?" Maya asked. "Standard galactic military configurations," replied the Academy Commandant. "Infantry squads with various weapons, armored vehicles for direct assault and mobile support, aircraft for reconnaissance and fire support, engineering units for obstacle clearing and construction. Maya nodded as she memorized the layout and began formulating her initial plans. The key would be using her forces in ways that her opponents would not anticipate. Traditional galactic tactics emphasized direct confrontation and overwhelming firepower. Human tactics emphasized mobility and deception. "Will I have access to intelligence reports about enemy positions and strength?" Maya asked. "Limited intelligence only," Lirelei replied. "The same information that would be available to a real commander in a similar situation. Your opponents will have the same constraints." Maya spent the next several hours studying the simulation environment and testing different approach routes. She paid particular attention to terrain features that might be overlooked by commanders who preferred direct assault tactics. She identified several positions that could serve as staging areas for unconventional attacks. As evening approached, word spread throughout the academy that the simulation was about to begin. Students and faculty gathered in the observation galleries that surrounded the simulation chamber. Maya had never performed in front of such a large audience, and she felt her nervousness increasing as the crowd grew. Her three opponents entered the chamber looking confident and prepared. Zara carried herself with the military bearing of someone born to command. Clay moved with the precise coordination typical of her species. Nyx seemed to glow with internal light as its crystalline structure processed tactical calculations. "Students, take your positions," Lirelei announced. "The simulation will begin in 5 minutes." Maya moved to her command station and began reviewing the units under her control. Each holographic soldier and vehicle represented sophisticated artificial intelligence programmed to behave like real military forces. The simulation would test not just tactical planning but also leadership and decision-making under pressure. Maya called out Kara from the observation gallery. "Remember that humans are supposed to be unpredictable. Do something none of them expect." Maya smiled and waved at her friend before turning her attention to the tactical display. Her opponents were already positioning their forces according to standard defensive doctrines. They expected her to attack along predictable routes using conventional tactics. "Simulation begins now," Lirelei announced. The holographic battlefield came alive around Maya as her units materialized at their starting positions. Her opponent's defensive forces appeared as red symbols scattered across the mountain terrain. Maya had 6 hours to capture 3 heavily defended objectives against opponents who knew exactly what they were doing. Maya began by ordering reconnaissance flights over the entire battlefield. While her opponents focused on strengthening their prepared positions, she gathered intelligence about terrain features and potential weaknesses in their defensive setups. "Interesting approach," she heard one of the observing instructors comment. "Most students begin with immediate offensive operations." Maya ignored the commentary and continued her analysis. Human military doctrine emphasized understanding the battlefield before committing to any particular strategy. She watched her opponents' movements and began to identify patterns in their thinking. Zara was positioning her forces for maximum firepower concentration. She expected frontal assaults and was prepared to meet them with overwhelming defensive fire. Clay was coordinating multiple defensive positions to provide mutual support. Any attack on one position would draw fire from several others. Nyx was using computational analysis to identify the most likely attack routes and positioning forces to block them. All 3 approaches were logical and effective against conventional tactics. Maya smiled as she realized that her opponents had just given her exactly the information she needed to defeat them. "Begin Phase 1, Maya ordered her units. Instead of attacking any of the 3 objectives, Maya began what appeared to be a withdrawal. Her forces pulled back from the forward positions and seemed to be repositioning for a more cautious approach. In the observation gallery, several students laughed at what looked like immediate human cowardice. But Maya was not retreating. She was implementing the first stage of a plan that would use every advantage human tactical thinking could provide against opponents who had never faced truly adaptive warfare. The simulation chamber, filled with the sounds of moving vehicles and marching troops, as Maya began to show the galaxy what humans could do when they stopped playing by other people's rules and started making up their own. Her opponents watched with growing confusion as the human forces seemed to scatter in all directions without any apparent plan or purpose. None of them realized that Maya had just begun the most complex tactical deception any of them had ever encountered. The real battle was about to begin, and Maya Collins was ready to prove that sometimes the best way to win was to make sure your enemies never understood what game they were really playing. Maya watched her opponents react to her apparent retreat with exactly the responses she had predicted. Zara began repositioning her forces to take advantage of what looked like human weakness. Clay started extending her defensive perimeter to claim more territory. Nyx calculated new probability matrices based on the assumption that Maya was regrouping for a more conventional assault. All three of them were thinking exactly like their species. Military doctrines had trained them to think. That was about to become their greatest disadvantage. Phase 2 initiate, Maya ordered quietly. What had looked like a chaotic retreat suddenly revealed itself as in carefully orchestrated deception. Maya forces had not been running away. They had been moving into positions that her opponents never expected anyone to use. Small teams of human soldiers appeared on mountain peaks that the defenders had considered impossible to reach. Engineering units emerged from valleys that seemed too narrow for military vehicles. How did she get troops into those positions? Demanded one of the observing instructors. The terrain analysis indicated those areas were impassable. Human military engineers are trained to make the impossible merely difficult, Lireley replied with growing admiration. Miss Collins is using the landscape itself as a weapon. Maya had spent hours studying the holographic terrain, looking for routes that existed but would not be obvious to commanders trained in conventional tactics. She found paths that required individual soldiers to climb and crawl and squeeze through spaces that normal military planning would ignore. Her forces were now attacking from directions that her opponents had never considered defending. Zara tried to respond by redirecting her firepower toward the unexpected threats, but Maya had anticipated this reaction. As soon as the Vorthan commander began shifting her forces, Maya launched the real assault from a completely different direction. Human aircraft appeared from behind mountain peaks, where they had been hiding, and struck at defensive positions that were suddenly left unprotected. Impossible, Zara muttered, as she watched her carefully planned defenses begin to crumble. No commander would risk splitting their forces across so many different approaches, but Maya was not splitting her forces. She was using them the way humans had always used military assets when facing superior opponents. Every unit had multiple purposes, and every attack served several objectives simultaneously. Her mountain climbers were not just attacking from unexpected directions. They were also gathering intelligence and disrupting communications, and creating psychological pressure on defenders who had thought their positions were secure. Clay tried to coordinate a response using the perfect communication abilities that made Chithari tactics so effective. But Maya had studied the insectoid species methods and prepared countermeasures that exploited their reliance on constant information sharing. Human electronic warfare units began broadcasting false signals that confused the Chithari coordination networks. Her forces are using our own communication protocols against us, Clay clicked in amazement. How did she learn to mimic Chithari tactical frequencies? Humans are excellent at learning from observation, Maya replied over the general communication channel. We have been watching and studying galactic military methods for years. The question is whether you have been studying ours. Nyx attempted to recalculate battlefield probabilities based on the new tactical situation, but discovered that human behavior did not follow any of the logical patterns that made mathematical prediction possible. Every time the Quarzite computer brain thought it understood what Maya was doing, the human commander would change tactics and approach problems from completely different angles. The human tactical algorithms are non-deterministic, Nix announced, with something that might have been confusion. Her decision-making process appears to be based on intuitive rather than logical frameworks. That is because human tactics are designed to be unpredictable, Maya explained as her forces continued their multi-directional assault. We assume that our enemies will try to analyze and counter our strategies, so we build flexibility and randomness into our planning from the beginning. The first objective fell to Maya forces after a battle that lasted only minutes. Her opponents had been so focused on defending against conventional attacks that they were completely unprepared for human soldiers who approached from above and below and through terrain, features that military doctrine said could not be used for assault operations. This is remarkable, commented the Academy Commandant. I have never seen tactical innovation on this level from a first-year student. Maya felt a surge of confidence as she realized her strategy was working better than she had hoped. Her opponents were not just being outmaneuvered, they were being forced to think in ways their species had never developed. Vorthan military tradition emphasized overwhelming force. Chithari tactics relied on perfect coordination. Quarzite strategies depended on computational analysis. None of them knew how to fight an enemy who refused to be predictable. The second objective required a different approach because her opponents were beginning to adapt to her methods. Maya switched tactics completely and began using conventional assault techniques that looked exactly like what galactic military doctrine would recommend. Her enemies prepared to counter these familiar strategies, only to discover that Maya was using them as cover for even more unconventional attacks. She is attacking us with our own tactics, while simultaneously doing something completely different, Zara reported, with growing frustration. How can we counter strategies that contradict themselves? You cannot counter them, Maya replied as her forces overwhelmed the second defensive position. That is the entire point of human tactical flexibility. We do not commit to any single approach because commitment makes you predictable, and predictability makes you vulnerable. The third and final objective was the most heavily defended position on the battlefield. Maya opponents had concentrated their remaining forces there and prepared for a siege that could last for hours. They expected her to exhaust her troops in costly frontal assaults against prepared positions. Instead, Maya did something that none of them had ever seen before in a military simulation. She stopped attacking. What is she doing? Asked Clay as human forces pulled back and took defensive positions of their own. I am changing the rules of engagement, Maya announced. Who says I have to attack your position when I can make you attack mine? Maya began using psychological warfare techniques that were completely unknown to galactic military science. She had her forces conduct activities that appeared to be preparations for withdrawal while simultaneously making it clear that they were not actually leaving. Her aircraft conducted reconnaissance flights that seemed designed to locate escape routes. Her ground forces began what looked like defensive preparations for a long siege. The effect on her opponents was exactly what Maya had hoped for. Commanders who had been trained to think in terms of decisive battles and clear objectives found themselves facing an enemy who seemed willing to wait indefinitely for the right moment to act. She is trying to force us to abandon our defensive advantages, Nix calculated. If we remain in static positions, she can withdraw and claim a strategic victory by controlling 2 of 3 objectives. But if we attack her, we give up our defensive superiority, Zara added. How can we win when either choice leads to disadvantage? That is the point, Maya explained. Human warfare is not about finding the perfect solution to tactical problems. It is about creating situations where your enemies do not have any good options. The psychological pressure continued to build as Maya forces seemed to be preparing for multiple different contingencies simultaneously. Her opponents could not determine whether she was planning to attack or withdraw, or attempt some completely different strategy. The uncertainty began to affect their decision-making as they tried to prepare for threats they could not predict. Finally, Zara made the decision that Maya had been waiting for. The Vorthan commander ordered an assault on human positions, hoping to achieve a decisive victory before Maya could implement whatever strategy she was planning. It was exactly the wrong decision. Maya forces had been preparing for this moment since the beginning of Phase 3. What looked like defensive positions were actually carefully prepared kill zones designed to channel attacking forces into areas where human firepower could achieve maximum effectiveness. The apparent preparations for withdrawal were actually repositioning maneuvers that placed human units in perfect position to surround and destroy any force that abandoned the safety of the mountain fortress. The battle was over in minutes. Chithari and Korzite forces found themselves trapped in terrain that Maya had turned into an enormous trap. They had given up their defensive advantages for the chance to attack an enemy who had been planning their destruction since the moment they made that decision. "Simulation complete," announced Lirelay as the holographic battlefield dissolved around them. "Victory to Commander Collins?" The observation galleries erupted in amazed discussion as students and faculty tried to understand what they had just witnessed. Maya had not just won the simulation. She had demonstrated tactical methods that none of them had ever seen before. "That was extraordinary," Zara admitted as she approached Maya after the simulation ended. "I have studied Vorthan military history for my entire life, and I have never encountered strategies like yours. Where did you learn to coordinate so many different approaches simultaneously?" asked Clay with genuine curiosity. "How did you make decisions without mathematical analysis of probability outcomes?" Nix wanted to know. Maya looked around at her former opponents and saw something she had not expected. Instead of resentment or embarrassment, she saw genuine interest and respect. These brilliant students wanted to understand human tactical methods, not to dismiss them, but to learn from them. "Human military doctrine is based on a simple principle," Maya explained. "We assume that everything will go wrong and plan accordingly. We train our commanders to think creatively under pressure and to see opportunities where others see only problems." "But how do you coordinate complex operations without perfect communication?" Clay asked. "We use something called initiative," Maya replied. "Human soldiers are trained to make decisions independently when communication breaks down. Instead of waiting for orders, they analyze the situation and take action based on their understanding of overall objectives." "And how do you predict enemy responses without computational analysis?" Nix inquired. "We use intuition and experience and educated guessing," Maya said. "Human commanders study their opponents and try to understand how they think. Then we try to do things they would not expect." Instructor Lirelay approached the group with an expression that might have been pride or amazement. "Miss Collins, you have just demonstrated tactical concepts that could revolutionize galactic military doctrine. Would you be willing to present your methods to the Academy faculty?" Maya felt a surge of excitement at the possibility of sharing human knowledge with the greatest military minds in the galaxy. "I would be honored to help bridge the gap between human and galactic tactical thinking. This changes everything we thought we knew about human capabilities," the Academy Commandant declared. "I believe we need to completely reevaluate our assumptions about your species' military potential." As the crowd dispersed and students returned to their dormitories, Maya found herself surrounded by classmates who wanted to learn more about human warfare. The same beings who had dismissed her as primitive just days before were now eager to understand the methods that had allowed her to defeat some of their best tactical minds. Kara pushed through the crowd to reach Maya with a huge grin on her blue face. "I told you that you would surprise everyone, but I never expected anything like this." Maya smiled back at her friend and looked around at the faces of students from dozens of different worlds. For the first time since arriving at the academy, she felt like she truly belonged here, not as a curiosity or an experiment, but as an equal contributor to the advancement of galactic military science. "This is just the beginning," Maya said, as she thought about all the human knowledge and experience that could be shared with these eager minds. Humans have much to learn from galactic civilization, but perhaps we have something to teach as well. The Academy had admitted its first human student, expecting to observe and catalog the limitations of a primitive species. Instead, they had discovered that sometimes the most advanced tactical thinking came from beings who had learned to thrive in chaos and uncertainty. Maya Collins had proven that human adaptability and creativity could compete with any military tradition in the galaxy. More importantly, she had shown that cooperation and mutual respect were more powerful than assumptions and prejudice. The smirk that had started this entire adventure had evolved into something much more valuable. It had become the foundation for a new era of understanding between humanity and the stars.